Live from the Sinister District and the great beyond. Good evening, everyone, everything, and all creatures of the night. I'm Michael Paul, alongside Mr. Curbs. Tonight we explore witchcraft and how you can use it for good. Stay right where you are. You're listening to the Sinister District. Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Sinister District. Another day, another week. I'm Michael Paul, alongside Mr. Curbs. How are you?
Oh, I'm all right.
Well, that's very good. And we are joined with our special guest here today. She goes by the name of Olivia. Hello, welcome to the show.
Hi, gentlemen. Thanks for having me.
It is a pleasure. We're going to be talking about witchcraft, how you could use it for positive things, and just go into depth and how do you even do witchcraft? I don't really know much about it, so we're gonna figure out here today, and we're very excited. So welcome again. And where do we even start? How did you get into witchcraft, and how do you do it?
These are really good questions. And first thing I'm actually gonna do is turn it around on you, right? Like, what do you think of when you think of witchcraft?
Well, I know that you have a witchcraft kit and things to do it, and what I think it is like a spiritual sort of thing. Maybe you find a different part of your mind and you do something with it, but I don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
I
All
don't really
right.
know anything about real life witchcraft. Like when I hear witchcraft, I just think of what you see in like movies and stuff.
You
I've never
you're
really
not
heard
taking
of
a
too much about.
broomstick and stirring a pot now,
Yeah,
are you?
yeah, yeah. Obviously.
I mean, I might be, but that might be more for effect than anything else. Well, you asked me how I came to witchcraft, and that's a really interesting question. It's important for the listeners to know, for you guys to know, that I'm Catholic and raised Catholic, and I'm a practicing Catholic. That is, where my faith and spiritual life are centered. And several years ago, I was chatting with a friend at church, and she made a joke in passing, something about a Christian witch. And I laughed and I said, "Oh, haha, sounds like me," just being silly, thinking about things like Harry Potter and other sorts of modern pop culture witches. And she messaged me later after Mass and she said, "I didn't want to say anything at church, but are you actually a Christian witch?" And I said, "Oh, wait, I'm not sure I knew that was a thing." So she and I then chatted a little bit more about what that means. And I did some Googling and I came to find out that witchcraft, it can be a complementary practice to Christianity, that they are not necessarily antithetical. And that comes from the fact that witchcraft covers a lot of different things. I think people think of witchcraft as maybe a religion. They might be mixing that up with being Wiccan. To my understand, Wiccan is a religion, is a faith, but witchcraft is simply a practice. So that's how I, at least, came to understand it, came to become familiar with it.
Through this friend in church.
Yeah, through this friend in my Catholic church.
So, what does it exactly entail? I guess just give an example of something
Yeah.
you do.
So in my practice, and you call it practicing witchcraft in the same way that you practice a lot of different things, right? It's a repetitive sort of thing that you come back to. For me, my faith, God is the source of all things. So the craft is just another medium for things like prayer, self reflection, intention setting. Um, Witchcraft is different for every practitioner, right? Nothing I say is the definitive word on witching, either in general or even maybe how it might progress in my life. So this is just a look at my craft as it currently stands. And since for me, in my faith, God is the source of everything, like any power, any ability, all of that sources from Creator, right? So I don't feel like any power is sourced in me specifically, or any like items or incantations. And the craft is the way that I kind of like channel the ask and channel the intention is through these practices. And it's all almost like a form of prayer, right? That's how I view it.
Now I did look at I like a little bit of research before doing this. When I was like googling like stuff about like witchcraft and stuff, I saw like multiple sources saying that like it's often condemned in the Bible. Is that,
Hmm.
or is it like
Right.
what you it was what you do like sort of like different, or is there like certain kinds of witchcraft that's like condemned in the Bible but like others
Yeah,
aren't?
it's a great question. So, as I mentioned earlier, right, for me, all power, all glory, everything sources from God, right? None of this is about me and my individual power. I am also not asking for power from other sources that are not God. That is where we get those biblical verses where you say, like, don't practice this, because it's saying don't go to the devil, don't go to alternate forces that are not your Lord, because there is no true power there. And you are trading, your God-given life and your God-given abilities for something that is not true, that is not real, that is going to cause you and others around you harm, right? Um, so like in the same way that the Bible says like no false idols, it's a similar thing.
Right.
It's the way you interpret the Bible can affect your viewpoint sometimes too. So it could be tricky, but you know,
Of course, like faith is different for everybody, right? So this is the
right.
way that I practice it, and this is the way that it lives in my life.
How often do you do this, and how do you go about doing it?
Yeah, I'll give an example. Um, Something I do often is setting intention candles. And this is something we do at church too. I mean, how often do you go into a church and you go and you light a candle? At home, I have a small altar that's always covered in different artifacts, and it's very tied to the seasons, both the natural seasons and the liturgical seasons of the church calendar, seasons in my life, maybe holidays that are happening, whether those holidays are secular, cultural, etc. So my altar is a very grounding space for me in my world, and I'm paying attention to the sabbats, the Sabbaths, right? So Yule, for instance, is like the midwinter, is the solstice. Um, and the sabbats of the calendar are the solstices and the equinoxes, and then the midpoints between them as well. So my practice is very focused around how the seasons turn and how the calendar turns, and like also how that lines up with what's going on in my life. So that's a physical setting for that. And then coming back to the, for instance, intention candles, I will sit down with an intention for a person. I will begin that intention in the same way that I would begin a prayer. I often find myself calling upon the Holy Spirit specifically when I am, we'll say, casting an intention or putting out an intention, right? I really lean on that. The Holy Spirit is one of the primary ways that God actually works in our physical world. So I often find myself returning to a common incantation in Latin, Veni Sancte Spiritu, which is come Holy Spirit. So I often start with that. I ground myself in that. I come into the presence of God, and I will light the candle for this person. And sometimes I will put something that sort of centers that intention, something that maybe belongs to them, something that I've written down that has to do with their intention. So, sometimes it's things just like This person is looking for a job. This person is hoping to pass an exam. Sometimes that person is passing from this life into the next. And this is a way that I can put that person's intentions more clearly in both my mind and hopefully at the feet of the Lord, and say, keep your spirit upon this person, guide them, and look after them. Right.
Hmm. Is this when you like I guess make these intentions for different kinds of people? They like what would you say is like I guess the success rate? Like how
That's a
Um,
good question.
it is a great question. I would say, and we do our best, or that's the royal we. I do my best not to categorize my practice in terms of success and failure. Um, Often because, as with many other things, they aren't happening on my time, right? They're happening in God's time, as we say. Um, so sometimes the outcome I'm looking for isn't always the outcome that needs to happen. But I will say with the intention candles, I have noticed a pretty obvious pattern. When I tell somebody that I'm going to light my intention candle for them and I go through with it, it has happened every single time. When I tell somebody I'm going to light my intention candle for them and then I get busy, I usually get bad news on that front. So, interestingly enough, and like I said, I'm not usually one to keep track, but this is one of those practices that does really seem to pan out.
And you would say this is like more powerful than like a prayer? Like you're using the seasons, you're just using these different methods to spiritually connect
You ask a
stronger?
good question. And it's interesting that you use the word use, that you use the season, that you use these things. And I try very hard in my practice not to think about me being the, like, how would I say this? I'm definitely a conduit, but I'm not like, the seasons are not bending to me. I'm not using them because I can't. Like, I don't have that kind of power.
Right.
More like I'm drawing on them, I'm asking them. Um, and that's also like a careful thing I personally have to be careful of, given that I, have this unique intersection of Catholicism and witchcraft. Always reminding myself that creation is like this divine design and divine output. And so it's less of that I'm using them and more that I'm looking to them for inspiration, that I'm looking to them for comfort and for grounding in this deep, deep winter time that we're in right now. I don't know where you guys are, but where I am, it is really cold and really awful and really dark. And it's great in these dark wintertime months to look to the calendar, and we just passed the Sabbat of Candlemas, which is like the midwinter sort of festival of the return of the light. And even though it's awful outside, I do find myself noticing the increase of light more and more every day. And there are some other things on my altar, like some other sort of like pine needles and certain candles I put out this time of year that remind me that other things are coming, right? And that I should live in this season and not just wait for it to end.
Right.
Yeah.
Embrace the outside around you.
Yeah, that's personally how I ground my practice. I do find that a lot of other witches that I've met, either in person or online, that's really critical to like the craft, is remembering that you are part of a much greater network of life. That's like key. I can't speak to witchcraft in general, I would say, because everything is so unique. But I would say that that is going to be a big unifier for, if you speak to any other witches, if you have them on your podcast.
So the seasons is one thing that you embrace. Is there any other things? Do you believe in astrology, for example, or how do those play into spiritual?
Yeah, astrology is an interesting one. And again, it's so much more beyond the seasons. It is really about creation, right? Everything that
Yes.
is in the natural world. So the stars are absolutely part of that. Um, this is like a funny quirk about me. I grew up skeptical of astrology, so that has been one that I have been slower to adopt. Um, and it's always about learning what does and does not work for you as a practitioner, right? For some people, that is where they go. They read star charts, they go outside and sit under the stars. That is how they commune, that's how that they practice. For me, astrology with an L is less part of my practice. Do I absolutely go outside in the phases of the moon and under certain constellations to, do certain meditations or to clear my head? Yes. And it's usually walking widdershins around my house at night.
You've mentioned you use like candles in a lot of your practices. Is
Mhm.
there any other things that you like, such as like crystals or anything that you also use, or is it mainly just candles?
Interesting that you bring that up. So, in the way that I said, oh, astrology was not really a thing that, had a place in my life, rocks and crystals, big thing that had a place in my life.
Hmm.
Always really loved geology, always really loved rocks and minerals and gems as a child. So, I always had a really robust collection long before I came to witchcraft. Um, I think I find their creation so interesting, like their growth, the way that a mineral or a gem is created um, can be very reflective, right? Understanding whether a rock is like igneous or metamorphic, whether it's created from certain molecules or, which elements on the periodic table it came from. And I think those are great reflective pieces. I am undereducated on, I know how other witches sometimes use them for, conducting certain energies or using them to align with chakras. That's not an area that I have a lot of experience in. So, but it may be a place where I explore later, just out of interest, out of sheer, you know, understanding. I think it's always important to continue educating and ask questions and be curious. As of right now, I have a ton of rocks and crystals around. Um, in the space where I live, I do rotate them on my altar depending on what kind of intentions I'm setting, depending on the season, depending on honestly what I feel like might be nice to look at. Here's something I do when I need a refresh on kind of like if I've been in a funk or if I've passed a certain milestone, or particularly if I have gotten out of a tough phase, right? I like to do a crystal refresh. So, all of the rocks and gems and things that I have scattered around my living space, I will collect them all in. I'll take a look at my collection that I have in reserve, and I will do I almost always do it in the spring, like for sure, but I'll also do it at other times where I do like a spring cleaning with my crystals. I'll swap things out, I'll take out things I haven't had out in a while. I'll look up like the meanings, behind certain rocks and crystals.
Right.
I almost always have carnelian out. That's my favorite. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you have strategically choose these crystals. It's not like you're just gonna pick up a rock. I mean, these crystals probably mean something spiritually, and
Hmm.
I'm not familiar too much, but uh, can you recognize some of the popular like gems or rocks maybe that you could use?
Yeah, sure. I personally love carnelian. It's very adventure focused. It's very artistic. So I usually have a lot of carnelian out. It's also really interesting, and I encourage your listeners to kind of research what works for them or what they like. The shape of a stone also matters. So if it's a geode versus if it's a polished stone, an unpolished stone, is it in the shape of a wand, right? They are different conduits, and they have different expressions of the beauty of that gem and of that crystal. And, to my limited understanding, they are also meant to like channel different kinds of energies, and they direct the energy of that crystal in different ways.
Yeah, these are beautiful. It says they boost your energy, spark your creativity. They're confidence boosters, calm your worries. I mean, it looks like certain rocks have certain things that they do, and the way you can connect spiritually through, I guess, like nature around you and Earth. All these things come from Earth, right? Is what you're doing, embracing the things around you. So that's what I'm getting here.
Yeah, and it's about remembering that you're part of that larger pattern. Like,
Right.
I think humans have a tendency to put themselves above or apart from creation. It's really important to remember that we are part of it. Like, we are of that.
Definitely. Oh, is there any other methods that you use? We got gems. We got seasons.
We have gems. We have seasons. Yeah, being in community is a big one.
Oh, that makes sense. Right.
Yeah, sharing your craft with others. It's a very private thing, but it's always very important to have those people in your life who are your space for that. So often being in community with others, talking through certain practices, what has worked, what doesn't, learning from other people, hearing how that works in their lives and how it's transformed certain things for them. And then also just sometimes cooking a meal together, lighting some candles. I am not a tarot reader. I do have some friends who really enjoy that. And so we sometimes sit down and do that. I do know that in some Catholic circles, that's very frowned upon. And again, I kind of keep out of that a little bit. But I'm always listening for people's perspectives. I really enjoy when my friends do a tarot reading, though.
Yeah, that could be interesting. That could be very interesting.
That's like predicting the future, right, or something like that. Is that what that is?
It
Yeah,
depends on the
sort of.
kind of reading you do. Yeah. You can do a futures reading, but you can also do like a past, present, future. You can also ask specific questions about like a path that you're on or where you might be going. Um, there are 9-card readings, 3-card readings, 5-card readings. There are very different ways you can do it. And I am no expert. I've never done a tarot reading. I've had cards read, but I've never done it myself.
So witchcraft is a separate thing. It's not like you could tell the future or like do something like that. It's more of like embracing the earth around you, using these different or embracing these different things, and then spiritually connecting to talk to God and try to communicate. And let's say you want to do I guess, would you call it a spell or something? I guess, or like a practice. What do you
I
call it?
often
What do you do?
call them spells just because I feel like that's like, ooh, I'm trying to like enact my will on a thing. I typically call them incantations. Yeah.
So when you do an incantation, right? Let's say you want to do one for somebody who's ill, right?
Mhm.
So how would you go about doing that? Would you do the same thing like with gems or seasons or?
That would definitely would be an intention candle.
Right.
Again, like in my craft, there might be some witches who would say that they would go directly to that person. Maybe they would bring certain things to them. Maybe they would, say certain words or do certain actions with them. For me, I go straight to that intention candle because I'm going to the foot of the Lord for that sort of help. There are certain items or elements that you can add around the candle that sort of draw in certain intentions, right? If you're looking for healing, then you're going to want to use plants or herbs or rocks that are associated with healing, right? Wellness of the mind, wellness of the body, different things that are going to conduct that intention.
Right. I'm sure you tried that before? They also have incense. They have
Incense,
offerings,
yes.
statues, symbols. There's all these
Yeah.
different items.
Yeah. I do also love me some incense. And it's so interesting. I mean, so many of these elements are present in Catholicism, right? It's just I translate them into more of like a home environment.
So how could we go about doing this? What if we want to try to do some witchcraft, some spells for people?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I've never given this advice to somebody who's not already in the craft in some way, shape, or form. The way that I went from knowing nothing to knowing something, though, was honestly YouTube videos. YouTube videos and books. So I would definitely encourage. Here's the thing that was really helpful for me early on in my practice and continues to be helpful. Going and getting a witch journal. There are guided journals that you can find at Barnes and Noble or online, where you kind of sit down, and it doesn't have to be an everyday thing, but they're good for like the month, the season, the certain time of year, and you journal through it, and the journal will give you certain prompts. So I really encourage that as a beginning. There are like beginners journals that will introduce you to the fundamentals of witchcraft, and again, witchcraft in the sense of like all the things we sort of fundamentally share, like creation and the turning of the seasons.
This is in your head, or is this spoken word when you go about doing the spell?
Oh, like when I'm intoning an incantation. Usually it's out loud. But sometimes I will do it quietly, or, like in my own head. Depends. I mean, typically I like to be home if I'm going to engage in my practice, but if I'm out in the world, I mean, that's also sometimes no different than just sitting there and saying a prayer and having a chat with God. But if I'm going to go through and light candles and bring in certain elements like that, then I'm going to be at home and I'll probably be speaking out loud.
Would you like to share one of your, spells that you've done, or maybe they'll want to hear how you go about doing it,
Yeah, I'll go back to the one I started talking about earlier with the intention candles. It's because it is super simple. One of the things that is sort of a fundamental of witchcraft is protection, right? If you are going to cast, if you're going to intone, then you want to be in a protected space. So the way that you want to start off any sort of, however you call it, I call them incantations, prayers, other people will call them spell work. The way you want to start off is through protection. And the most common form of protection, I mean, you even see it in pop culture, are like rings of salt, right? Like circles. Right. So casting that circle, and I don't mean like walking around my room with with salt, but the first thing that I do is, after I make the sign of the cross, is that I mentally cast a circle of fire. For me, it's fire because, again, I'm typically asking for the Holy Spirit to come, and the Holy Spirit is often embodied through flame. So I will intone Veni Sancte Spiritu, which means come, Holy Spirit. And I will mentally cast, I will envision that sort of ring of fire around where I am, either the physical place, physical building, or around sort of me a little more, a little less physically. And that's the very first thing that I do when I open something. And then I do my casting. And I do my closing in the same way. I close the circle. I imagine it releasing and like condensing. And then I make the sign of the cross. And that is how I typically open and close. We'll call it spell work for your listeners.
Right. And I heard if you break the circle, then it disrupts the energy, messes it up.
Yeah. So that's also why when you're like, oh, do you typically speak out loud? Like, I don't typically do a lot of, casting or things like that out in like the world. I'm almost always in my space and kind of in that sort of protected environment. And I'm intentional and I'm working on this either it's brief or it's a very protected amount of time. I did that once where I was actually painting something for a friend's girlfriend, and it was going to go in her room, and I was like casting while I was painting it because I was imbuing it with certain protections and hopes for her well-being. And so that was a longer period of time. Typically my casting is only like 3-4 minutes, about the length of a short prayer. But if it's longer, then I definitely want to be in a more protected environment to ensure the stability of that casting circle.
So why do you think people have such a negative view of witchcraft? It sounds like a good thing to do. It sounds like a positive embodiment.
I find it really centering. I find it to be very reflective. And it also, I think it's positive to think about doing positive things for people, right? I think a lot of what I've spoken about is casting things on behalf of others. I don't think I've ever thought about that before, but a lot of my works is about that. And so it's good. It's good to think about other people. It's good to think about not just yourself and your own needs. But I mean, I'm not an expert in the history of witchcraft. I am still exploring that because it's really interesting. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, long histories of persecution, and whether or not people were even witches, right? Of course, we know from the Salem witch trials and things like that. So it also has, of course, occult associations over the centuries. It's not exactly like this, but I think of are you a good witch or a bad witch, right?
Right.
That sort of a
Yeah,
thing, and it's not so black and white, but yeah.
it's probably. I think it's also probably because of like portrayals in different kinds of media. Like
Mm-hmm.
witches are usually always like the enemy or the bad guy.
Yeah. And fables and fairy tales that were,
Mhm.
told for thousands of years. It's often a witch,
Do you
Yeah.
and
look
she's
up
not the good
to
guy.
Yeah. Do you look up to any other witches or like historical folklore?
Any specific like historical figures? No, there are none that come to mind. And like I said, that is sort of a newer exploration for me, so I'm not as well versed in that as others might be. But no, nobody specific.
It's all the center of it is all God.
For me, yeah, it is.
If you'd like to talk to Michael Paul or Mr. Curbs, shoot an email to thesinisterdistrict@gmail.com. That's thesinisterdistrict@gmail.com. You can also join the Sinister District Discord server in the description. This is the Sinister District.
No, maybe we'll get a bad witch maybe one day, but
bad witch.
Uh,
A bad
I
witch.
well, I'm curious what do they think of Satan? Like, that just that doesn't sound very good.
What would it be like voodoo or something?
No, I mean, it's also, yeah, be very, it's good to be careful. Voodoo, of course, has like, there's racist undertones with how we perceive hoodoo and voodoo, which lead it to be like, oh, it's black magic. It's this, that, and the other thing, right? When in reality, it really doesn't have anything to do with a lot of voodoo and hoodoo practitioners are, guess what? Catholic.
Ooh.
Hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
isn't that the one where you like take like a doll of someone and like stab it with a needle or something like that to like,
I think
or
that
is
you've got
it?
to do a little more research.
Oh, I
It's
did not
really
research
cool.
any. I did not
Yeah.
research any voodoo before.
Yeah. Like I said, it's as you both just said a minute ago, it has so much to do with how has pop culture influenced what we understand, about it. So important always for the listener to do their own research. And always beware, beware of your sources.
Now, what about crystal balls? I always wondered how does that help, or is that something else?
Ooh, interesting question. I do not use crystal balls at all. I haven't met a witch who uses one. Um, I don't know. I have no experience with that. I think you'll find if you have other witches on your podcast that it is a very unique practice depending on the practitioner.
It makes sense. Yeah, everybody has their own method of doing it,
Mm-hmm.
and you're right. It depends on what they want to cast, what they want to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have not tried to work um, much in the way of casting for myself. And I think I didn't even realize that until we kind of got into this conversation. Almost everything I cast is on behalf of other people. So I haven't tried even working certain things on myself outside of like, I don't know, outside of like very basic self reflection and, sort of journaling about my experiences.
Do you think you're ever gonna do one on yourself, or what do you think you would do it for?
Usually my practice is at least in the direction of intentions and future hopes and protection. So I have to imagine that if I were to cast something on behalf of myself, it would be in that direction. It would be about like keep me safe or, guard my heart or things along those lines.
How has your practice changed you as a person?
That's an interesting question. I have to think about that for a minute. How's it changed me? I think the biggest thing that has done for me is bring me back outside. I came to witchcraft sort of, I was an adult, but I was still young. And I think I had been so focused for many years about just getting to the next phase, whatever the next phase was, through certain levels of schooling, through getting a job, through whatever, just like getting through rather than living in. And my practice was a way for me to literally go outside, breathe in whatever the season is, whatever the time of year is, whatever the leaves were doing, and remind myself that, like, again, I am not apart from creation, I am a part of creation. And with that practice comes a lot of gratitude. Yeah. So that's been a great journey for me.
Do you believe in karma, or
Do I believe in karma? In the sense of, in the Indian sense, like in the Hindu sense, I'm not educated enough on that to comment, but I do believe that in the sense of like how I understand it, if you do good, it will come back to you. And, you know, if you do not, that will come back to you as well. I think that's been proven.
So is there like a book that you follow when you do these spells? Because I'm sure you don't want to harm other people by accident, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I have always counseled to start small. Don't don't try to run before you can walk, which sounds really cliche. I am not of the belief that if you choose a certain conduit for your spell casting that isn't exactly, you know, what it's supposed to be. I mean, if you choose something like that's supposed to be for protection when it's actually for offense, right? If you're choosing like a certain herb or a certain crystal that has certain properties that is like directly in conflict with the intentions you're trying to set, yeah, I mean, there's a possibility that it might negate or cancel it out. I think that if you're going to use those sorts of conduits, that you should be aware of their functions and their properties. So like, that's why I recommend starting with just a candle, right? Or some very simple things. Also the color of your candle, the shape of your candle, the scent of your candle, all of those things affect the candle's properties when it comes to your incantations and your casting. So all of these things are good things to be aware of, but your intention is the biggest part. Your intention and your protection are the most critical elements of doing casting. If your heart's in the right place and you have some wrong ingredients, well, you know, like I said, it may just negate what you're trying to do. I hope it would not cause harm, but also,
Yeah.
I'm no expert on that, so be careful, understand all the properties of the things you're using.
I would hope you don't do a spell and then you use a certain gem and it does a negative thing by accident, you know. That's But I think you're right. The intention, yeah, there's so many things to this. But what advice would you give someone curious about witchcraft?
Ooh. I think I've said a few of these things, but I'll kind of sum them up. Start familiar, right? Don't try to go outside your realm, especially at first. Start familiar, but start curious. I mean, really, like, go read, go watch, go journal, go think, go talk to other people. I think, you know, take care. If your gut is telling you that something doesn't feel safe or doesn't feel right, then stop. Exit that situation, exit that place, and kind of reassess. Yeah. Those are some of my pieces of advice. And go get a witch journal.
All right, you've heard it here. Get yourself some stuff. And, well, those are all the questions I have. What do you have, Curbs?
I mean, I don't really have, I guess, any leftover questions, but I guess, I just feel like, you know, it's like going into it, I didn't really know too much about witchcraft. I only did like, you know, a little bit of research, but you know, I actually find that quite fascinating. I like, you know, that it's like used in a like a positive spiritual way, which uh I feel like is something that like I feel like I haven't really heard all too much about, and you know, I just found like, you know, like learn something new every day. You know, I just found that pretty interesting.
Yeah, this is some
Awesome.
fascinating stuff, for sure.
Yeah, I'm really happy to have been your doorway for that.
Well, I mean, usually we go over theories, but that wouldn't quite work here, would it? So, Curbs, any final thoughts?
Isn't that what I just said?
I guess you did. Well, send us emails if you have any questions to thesinisterdistrict@gmail.com. If you have any questions for Olivia here. or for us.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining us from the Sinister District and the Great Beyond. Thank you for listening. And remember, in a world of blessings and spells, keep your faith strong, but your shadows closer. Good night.